Hello and welcome to another episode of Empower Apps. I'm your host, Leo Dion. Today I'm joined by, once again, Peter Witham for our annual State of the Union review. Peter, thank you for joining me.
Leo, buddy, how are you doing? We say it every year, but thank you, Apple, for doing this just for us. We appreciate it, right?
Yeah, that's right. For once, I'm doing a recording with you, and I'm actually 1 hour ahead because I'm live from California from an undisclosed location. Yeah, so, there's a lot.
Yes.
So, besides getting myself adjusted to the Pacific time zone and pretty much jotting down everything I could, yeah, it was a lot of stuff. What's your reactions as far as like this? Let's focus on the State of the Union. What's your big reactions to that?
Yeah. So I'm actually very happy with what we got this year. I feel that I've got, assuming that everything as is the sales pitch. I feel like I've got way more than I ever anticipated I would get this
Okay,
year to be excited about. Yeah. What about you?
I'm satisfied with the AI stuff.
Yes.
Um, it's kind of I want to see it in action, so that'll have to wait until I'm comfortable installing a beta on my primary phone. Because it's one of those things where it's like you see it and it's like, okay, wow, this is great, but like I want to actually use it and like see if it actually works as well as they say it is. And
Yes.
then I'm also curious about the actual APIs and how
Yep.
those are gonna be involved. Because I haven't trained a model, like, so that'll be interesting to see how helpful that actually is for that kind of stuff.
Yes, I'm very satisfied with the way that Apple wants it to work,
Mm.
and I think that's
Yeah,
good. My
I like
concern,
I like the emphasis on privacy,
yes,
so
yeah,
that's good.
on device was
Yes,
a given, right?
yes, right. Because
Yes.
that to me is like always been the thing that's held Apple behind, but
Mm-hmm.
like at the same time, to me that stuff is important.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I'm
No, and
glad that they've held it behind.
yes, yeah, I'm glad that they took their time. No doubt in my mind that quite a lot of it is reactionary, and probably part of the reason we're not getting it quite yet is because they pivoted a little bit and want to get it. They don't want to failure out of the door. Totally respect that, totally understand that. My only well, not my only concern, my big concern is Siri is our way into this intelligence. So, let's be honest, Siri, bit of a checkered past, right? You
Right.
you're taking. I'm worried that we'll have super fantastically clever tools locked behind an interface that causes a lot of frustration for a lot of people. I think that's the best way to put it. So
For the
Siri
user or
needs
for the developer?
yes. I think more for the user. I think for the
Yeah.
developer, assuming that the APIs work as they should, I think I don't want to say easy, but I think we will have a great time as developers bringing this stuff together.
Yeah. Yeah. What was I going to say? I think the other concern that I had was, I can't even remember now. Uh, but like, it is interesting that they're going to augment some of it with OpenAI.
Yes.
So that'll be great. If and it's opt-in, so I don't know what that means exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Did you
I'm trying to say
did
there
you
was something
see
else I was thinking of, and I can't even think of it. Anyway, what were we gonna say?
well, maybe, this taps into it, because I was going to say, I got a chance to watch some of the extra videos. I'm sure, like everybody, got off the keynote, got off the State of the Union, and then started cramming in as much as we could. Because we all knew later on we'd be appearing on each other's shows and, all these things. But they referred to what they called these adapters. And it sounded very much as like a way to plug in expansions. to these models, right?
Okay.
So, for example, like AI, open AI, and things like that, and this idea of it's local, and only when you give us permission can you take it to the cloud because you wanted to, not because we made you do it. And I think that's brilliant
Mhm.
because, my first thought was, are you going to raise the base level storage on like the iPhone or things like that to handle these models? And
Right.
so maybe that's how they do it. There's like this foundation core
Did you
of the everyday things.
did you look at the supported devices for Apple Intelligence?
The only thing I know is, if I recall it correctly, you're really talking about an iPhone 15 for all of the good stuff.
iPhone 15 Pro.
15 Pro.
Yes.
Interesting. I know some folks who are like, but wait, I just bought this 14 and you're telling me I'm cut off,
Yeah. Yeah.
So interesting
Yeah.
if it's just the Pro. I mean, I understand, right, that, yes, it's going to need some muscle, but let's be honest, all of those chips from recent years can
Yeah.
more than handle it, because Apple have told us this, right? If you think about the other lineup here for the rest of the services, they're basically saying, let's take the Macs, let's take the iPads. Essentially anything with an M something chip can do this. So it's interesting that there's that hard cutoff for essentially you've got to have the latest, greatest iPhone, right?
Yeah. And then let me look. What were the? So luckily, my Mac Studio will work as long as it's
You're
an
on the
M1
list.
Max. Yeah. Basically, I
Yeah,
think it's all the M1
yeah.
devices and
M1
iPhone
up.
15
Yeah.
Pro. Yeah. So
Interesting. Didn't catch the bit about the non-pro, which I don't know what the numbers look like, but I got to think the non-pro percentage is pretty high, right?
yeah, I would assume so.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess the idea being also, let me just look one more thing. iPad Pro, so it's the iPads with the M1s,
Okay.
and I don't see, which makes sense, I don't see the watch. I don't see Apple TV, and I don't see Vision Pro.
I would assume
Um,
the watch is going to essentially hand it off to
piggyback.
the phone, right?
Yeah, I would assume that too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting you mentioned the Apple TV. Didn't even think about that. Um,
but the Vision
yeah.
Pro more so, I would consider that like a device perfect for it. But
Me too. Yeah. Although,
that was
without
the
going
thing.
off.
It was the thing I wanted to mention was the Vision
Yeah.
Pro. It's so interesting. You speak of pivot because like last year that was the thing and it was going to
Yep.
be change the world. And here we are a year later. And I mean, there was definitely some good improvements to Vision Pro and Vision OS. So there's more stuff with SharePlay, volumetric API, tabletop kit, which looks really cool. I don't know if you're going to do
Yes.
anything with that. Some hand
I,
stuff, room anchors. Um,
yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah.
it
The
was a, like,
tabletop kit looks interesting. I might play with that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I think it
Yeah.
looks really cool.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, it's a big pivot from last year. Like
Mm-hmm.
we were talking about Vision OS last year, and everybody's gonna build apps for it, yada yada. You never bought one, right?
I did not buy one, not
Yeah.
yet.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Maybe if they sell them on eBay, I might get one if they're cheap. But yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah.
like it's a big pivot from last year as opposed to like building on top of what they did last year.
It is interesting, isn't it? Because one of the key topics of discussion with folks today, with folks I know who have the headset and folks who don't, but a lot of the conversation was around how little attention was given to the Vision Pro this year, and why. Because I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I mentioned this in a recent episode. I thought I would be tired of hearing about the Vision Pro all over WWDC.
Right.
Seems like that's not going to be the case. And I'm wondering if either sort of several scenarios here. Number one, Apple had to pivot to a lot of this AI stuff and said, okay,
Hmm.
we got to make this the major focus and respond. Another one is just engineering being stretched super thin to begin with.
Yeah,
But
they're
also,
understaffed. Yeah.
also the other option being maybe Apple maybe it's not going as well as they thought it would, and they're wondering what to do, and they need to buy themselves some time.
I mean, it's great that they're putting out more content. I think that's been the big thing, and I think that's going to help. But it's gonna be a hard sell because it's such a paradigm
Yes.
shift,
Yes.
in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I think now we're seeing the reality of, yes, this is a technically brilliant device. What are we going to use it for? Because more than anything, and I said this before too, and I believe this more than any of Apple's other platforms, it's developers making stuff for Vision Pro is what's going to make it, right? Unlike a lot of the other platforms, let's pick iPhone, for example,
Yeah.
where the built-in apps can carry that device a long way. That's not the case with the Vision Pro. It's a very much you've got this thing for a reason. And if you don't have apps to use it for that reason, I'm not going to say it's dead in the water, but you're going to go try real hard to force people to buy one, right?
Do you think that there's a similar problem with the Vision Pro and the iPad Pro, where it's
Hmm.
like one of the big complaints is like building professional apps for it, and it's like really
Yeah.
hard to build the professional apps for it, and the
Yes.
market isn't really there for it, and in the end, it just ends up being like a really good Netflix player. Um,
Yeah.
and that's like the same with Vision Pro, except it's like whatever 10 times more. I will say 10 times more expensive because usually
Yes.
people buy the cheap iPads, and it's like
Yeah.
okay, it's really hard to get that market and like it's really hard to justify making them building an app for
Yes.
those OSs.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think that they highlighted enterprise for the Vision Pro
Yeah,
this
that
year
was very interesting because
because I
that's where the big money is. I
yes,
mean, in the end,
that's what I was saying. That's where the apps are going to be, right? That is the most, to me, that's always been the most obvious use cases. They hit upon what I still think is the perfect one, medical, right?
yeah.
Um, and that's not going to be consumer, right? But
Mhm.
it absolutely plays the perfect scenario for, yes, medical professionals and those kind of things, engineers, this is a perfect device for that. And the problem with that is you only need a certain amount of apps. There's only a certain amount of folks that can make those apps. It's not
Mhm.
like everyone can just spin up a medical app, right? I mean, I
Yeah,
hope not. I really I
right,
don't need an indie developer. No offense to indie developers, but I'm not going to trust a heart surgeon with an indie app. Let's just put it that way, right?
right,
It's got to have
right.
certification.
Well,
And
and like your customer is going to be this massive hospital, and everything has
yes,
to go through 50 certifications and all that stuff.
yes,
So yeah,
exactly. That's what I mean. Yeah. And also the price. They're not going to flinch at a
yeah,
$3,500 device.
right, right,
The rest of us are going to go, you know what? I can get an awful lot of computer that does everything for that price.
right, right.
Right.
Exactly,
And I
exactly.
think that's still the problem. I will also add, though, that I also don't want a very cheap version of the Vision Pro with a bunch of stuff taken out. I don't want that either.
Like what?
Because like let's say that they reduce the sensors and they those kind of things to
Yeah,
reduce the
yeah, for
build
sure.
cost. I wouldn't want that. I would want the
How about the
full
front? How about the
experience or
front
nothing.
face? How about the front face display?
I've yet to see anybody with the front face display where I'm not creeped out.
Oh, okay, all right.
And
Do you
that
have
it
a
works
VR
how it
set?
should. I don't.
Okay.
But I've been in the room with people, and I've said to them, "It's like, stop looking at me. It's creepy. I know you're looking at me." you
Um,
know.
back to AI. So a couple of
Yes.
things I wanted to point out. So we got LLM on device, foundation model, specialization, fine tuning, adapters. We got all this lingo for APIs. I still haven't quite figured out. There's this idea of a private cloud compute where
Yeah.
you can compute some of these models
Mm-hmm.
um, basically in the cloud. So that's going to be interesting. We got this Genmoji. So we have some stuff basically where we can. There's like a writing API that they'll have, which sounds like ChatGPT for like
Yeah.
writing, but also we have this Genmoji image playground, I believe, which is actually an app and an API.
Hmm.
And then some more of like the generative API stuff that like OpenAPI has really been at the forefront of, right?
Yes.
So that'll be interesting to see. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes. I'm glad that they built in the ability to bring in third-party AI services, because the folks that were watching the keynote and the State of the Union with me, it's interesting. We all had the same reaction to the image generation tools, which
Okay.
was basically how terrible they were.
They look exactly like you would think image generation
Exactly that.
stuff would look.
Exactly that. That
Um,
was the problem.
yeah, what is the? Yeah, I mean that's what it looks like. It doesn't
Yeah.
look like it does. It looks exactly like you think it would look like, right?
Yeah. You know
Um,
how like you can see a mid-journey image and you go, that's a
yeah, Mid
mid-journey
Journey.
image.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Hmm.
So yeah, I don't, I don't get it.
Yeah.
I think people are gonna forget about it in 2 months or 3 months. So
The only
yeah,
use that I think the average user is going to use, and we're all going to drive ourselves crazy, is the Genmoji. I do think that if it works as advertised, is brilliant. Problem is, me at my age, I don't understand half of the existing ones, let alone the ability to create your own custom ones. I mean, I
so
might as well just give up talking to people right now.
lately, if I was back home, my bedtime consists of my 2-year-old grabbing my phone and randomly choosing emojis. Like he can
Okay.
identify what they are, but that's like what he loves to do is just go into
Yeah.
iMessage and send mom emojis.
Mm-hmm.
Um, cake, strawberries. That's what
Yes.
he likes.
Yeah.
So yeah, so now that he can create his own, I think it's a scary. It's going to be a very long bedtime now.
That's
So
it.
yeah, we'll
That's
see.
it. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. This is how conversations are going to go with me, right? And probably with anyone with kids will be like, what does turtle with cupcake on head riding roller skates mean? I mean, it looks great, but what are you trying to tell me, right?
right, exactly.
Yeah. Do
Yeah,
you want to go
yeah,
out and play? Do you want a cupcake, or are you looking for a pet? Which one is it? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be something. Are we? Is there anything else you want to talk about with Apple Intelligence? I feel like it's just kind of like a wait and see
Yes.
thing,
Yeah.
and I who knows?
There's one thing I did want to add, which I thought Apple did a very a very delicate line walk, but also may have confused some folks when they talk about the private, the cloud computer,
Mhm. Yeah.
and how because in one sentence they literally said, and I get it, I'm greatly reducing it here, but in one sentence they essentially said to the user who doesn't know any better, it's all on device, but you also have a private cloud where this stuff goes. And
Mhm.
so it's like, well, hang on, we understand the fine details, but to the average user, it's like, but you just told me it was all on device, but now you're telling me it can step up and go to the cloud. So which one is it? And so
Also,
it's, you know,
and we've got the third layer of just sending it to ChatGPT, right?
yes,
So
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I can see how that'd be confusing.
Yes, I
How that
did like
works.
though. I did like, normally I'm not a fan of these because it drives me crazy how many allow permissions you get. But I like that they made it very clear. Do you want to allow this to be sent off to Chat GPT, for example?
Right.
And I think that this is for once a use case where it's like, yes, I absolutely want to know when that's happening,
Mhm.
um, and choose. However, do I want to choose every time, or will there be an option that says, I'm comfortable with this, just do it, don't ask me every time? It's kind
Right.
of like the notifications thing, right?
I was
Do you
gonna
want to
say
be
that, or
reminded this time?
location, or any of that stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
totally.
So I think they're doing it in a very smart way. I just hope it works how it looks like it's going to work. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so one quick thing I want to mention was before we get more into Swift is the Swift Assist thing. Like,
Yes.
it's not out yet, but it'll be interesting to see when it is out, how that's going to work out. I'm a little
Yep.
bit worried that it's going to be like Xcode 15, or whatever, 16. So it'll be like
Yep.
Xcode 16.2 or 16.3. We won't get it until like December or January. So I'm going to hold my breath on that one.
Yep.
It'll be
And
cool if they can do it, especially with what we'll
yes.
be talking about in a few minutes. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
um,
absolutely. I'm with you. Is like, look, if you need, for once, Apple, if you need to take time on this to get it right, do that. This is
yes,
not
yeah,
something we need to have go wrong.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um, a quick mention in case I forget. I did update Bushel with the
Saw that.
new, yes, code name and wallpaper. It works. It works fine
Sweet.
in
Great.
Sequoia, so I'm happy about that. I'm not going up and down. I'm just moving my camera, so
No, no,
that's why.
no, sure. Yeah, no,
Uh,
I did want to touch on that because I saw, that you had just released a new version. So I think, like many of us, it's like my app worked. That's great.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly,
yeah,
exactly. And
yeah.
apparently they added the ability. You have to have a host and a guest, but apparent rumor is that iCloud sign-in works, but it has to
Oh,
be.
okay.
They have to be both macOS 15. So that's
I'm okay with
unfortunate
that.
for me. I mean, yeah, but
Yeah,
I want my
I
app
mean,
to work in Monterey. So
I was going to say, in the context of your app, it defeats somewhat of the good reasoning
right,
that it
right,
exists, right?
right.
And so maybe when we're a few more versions down the road,
Then it'll
that'd
be a
be
big
great.
benefit. Right.
But
Yeah.
it does feel like that one of those years for a hard cutoff on a lot of things, doesn't it?
Mhm. Right.
And you're
Right.
right. That's one of them right there, which is okay. This is the new base plate, 15
Yeah.
going forward. You know,
Yep. Yep.
yeah,
Okay. So let's get into the big celebration this year. We have the 10th anniversary of Swift. Peter, how
yeah.
long have you been in this development space?
Um, I would say Swift was the moment I took it seriously, right?
Okay.
And what I mean by that is when Swift came out 2014, that was the moment when I said, okay, me and my career, my focus, however you want to put it, I'm going to now pivot to mobile because Swift was something I could get my head around from day one based on previous experience. I had obviously, years before that, Objective C and played with it, but
Mhm.
I hadn't said this is my thing going forward. I'm happy to say 10 years later, it still is my daily thing. So, thank you, made the right choice.
Yeah.
But
Right.
I
Right.
also want to add, though, Leo, isn't it incredible that we're talking about 10 years? It does not feel like it, right?
No. No.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like it.
Yeah.
And it's been a good fit. Like as far as like Apple's stuck with it and really like dedicated the resources to it. It's open
Yeah.
source. They've amazed at the server side Swift community. So and we had talk today. I saw the mention of Godot. I know you're a big Godot fan.
Yes. Yeah.
So I was happy to see that. Swift embedded is a big thing that they
Yes.
talked about as well.
Yeah.
Swift on Windows, Swift on Fedora and Debian, Lambdas. I mean, it's not it's not as like, let's be honest, it's not as like, expansive as like stuff like Go or I'm trying to think what the other one that people use
Yeah.
a lot.
Rust,
Yeah,
you
Rust.
know?
Thank you. Go or
Yeah.
Rust, which has like
Yeah.
been the hotness in the last 5 years, but
Yep.
Swift is in a lot more places.
Yeah. Yeah. In
And
fact,
I think it's here to I think it's here to stay. I would say that.
yeah.
And yeah, it's been great. I think it's been a big boon for Apple, and I think there's a lot you could do with Swift that's been really amazing.
Yeah. I want to take a moment here to recognize the significance of Apple today, mentioning Linux, Windows embedded for
Hmm.
Swift.
Yeah,
Because, when I was talking with other folks, a common misconception, Swift, you mean that Apple thing. Okay, yes, technically that's true.
yeah.
But
I mean,
the
it's at least
fact,
it's 90%. But go ahead.
yes, but today, here you are on a slide, Apple mentioning other platforms, right? In particular, yes, I always feel like Linux is hand in hand with Mac OS and that anyway. But
Right.
the fact that they will, mention embedded and Windows in a Apple developer conference and highlighting that Swift is on there, not only it tells me two things. Number one, how very dedicated, we already knew this, Leo, how dedicated they are to Swift and saying, look, we may have created this thing, but we want this to be a thing for everybody as much as anybody wants it to be.
Right.
That's number one. And number two, this is a moment where Apple is saying, look, here's this technology. We recognize you may not necessarily want to use it on our ecosystem, and we're actually comfortable with that. And that's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big deal for the consumer. Arguably, it's a bigger deal for us as developers because, yes, over the last year, you've also seen I can write GNOME desktop apps with Swift, right?
Right.
All of these major players. Of course, Swift on a server has been a thing for a long time and is fantastic, but Apple's now bringing this to the forefront and saying, hey, essentially don't forget, or if you didn't know, you can use it here in these environments too. That's huge.
Right. Yeah, that is really huge. They're not embarrassed by it. It's like they have public posts on their blog about how it works on Windows, and is it Arc or the Arc browser that uses it for Windows?
Yes,
so,
it is.
We know it works. And it's here to stay. So,
and it's production ready. That's an important.
Ready.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, okay, that's a relative term, right? Everything's production ready until it crashes. That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else do you want to say about the 10th anniversary?
I'm still in awe that here we are on the 10th year already. Essentially I'm 10 years committed into this, like so many folks, and it's still going strong. And you have like today where it feels like it really is the start of a next chapter and saying, hey, it is definitely mature at this point. There will be some breaking changes. We'll get into that. But it is mature at this point. It's no longer you need to start converting your stuff to Swift. It's you should already be there, right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I liked there was the line, the best apps are built with native SDKs.
Yes. Don't you feel like that was a big line too? Really bringing a point home. And as someone who has to deal with cross-platform technologies on the day job, I really felt the impact of that statement because for me, nothing against the other platforms that I support, but native is where it truly feels, I don't want to say safe, but comfortable. Like I can do all these things and I know it's going to work and I don't have to hack around it. Right.
Yeah. I've been burnt by non-native, and I'm super happy to be comfortable with that choice. Yeah.
Every week.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll just straight up say that I got burned in a big way with React Native recently, and it still hurts.
Yeah, exactly. They mentioned Visual Studio Code. I know there's been a lot of work there getting that ready for Swift. And then we have the move of the Swift stuff to a separate org on GitHub, which is awesome.
A big deal again. Plays straight into that. Look, we want this to be a thing. In some ways, it's almost for some aspects. I feel like it's Apple saying, "Look, we get it. There's a certain percentage of people out there that having something attached to us might actually hurt it."
You think that's what I think they just have so many repos that
they do. Yes, but there is that. There is that part of it. We all know those folks. It doesn't matter what it is. Going to give $1 million to you, but it's from Apple. I don't want it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about Swift 6. So I'm going to go through the easy stuff. We have Type 3 finally, which is awesome.
Yes.
Really happy to see that. I want to try that out. We have this thing. Okay, did you understand what a non-copyable struct is? Because to me, it was like some weird hybrid of a struct and a class, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I watched, I think it was the Swift 6 video that I was watching afterwards. and they mentioned this, and I was trying to wrap my head around it as well, because I read it, like you read the name and you
Hmm.
make an assumption, right? You're like, oh, okay, so it's got to have. There's obviously a memory related thing here.
Hmm.
I'm not sure. Either this is a problem I've never encountered,
Hmm.
or I don't fully understand what I'm supposed to get from a benefit. All I know is a lot of people are happy about it. I'm not sure I understand why. That's kind of my
Right.
take. What about you?
I think too, like I've seen some work on the server side where this has been of interest.
Okay.
Um, so I'm curious about that. But like based on the example they had shown, where it was like was it a file reference? Like
I
that
think it was a
sounded
file
to
reference. Yes. Yeah.
right. So that sounded like it was like a class, but it was kind of a struct. I really want to deep dive and understand it. I didn't get to watch that video, so
Yeah.
yeah,
I think,
it's the one thing that I've heard of over the last year or so, but I didn't quite understand what the purpose is. So it'll be interesting to
yeah.
really deep dive into that over the next year because I think what I think might happen is I think we're going to see a lot of NS object stuff that was
Mm,
classes where it wasn't couldn't quite fit into a value type might be a good fit for the non-copyable struct, and I think that might be
that's good.
where it fits.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a good point. I hadn't thought about it like that, but you're right. Given that, of course, struct first, right? But
right.
not always possible, like you say in those scenarios.
Hmm.
Maybe that's where it is. I feel like it is something that, and if I remember rightly, this is one of the videos that has some source code with it. If I
Okay.
recall correctly, because I do feel like I need some source code examples to almost play with it, mess it up to understand. Okay, yes, you know what? This problem I've had, this is the answer, or
Right.
this is how I should adapt and use this. But you're right. I think I need time with this to really get my head around it and essentially break some things to understand. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Well, let's see what. Okay. So the big thing with Swift 6 obviously is data race stuff. Peter, have you deep dived into this?
I've only deep dived recently and sort of like, okay, I knew this was coming. It was one of those where it's like I don't feel it's been a daily problem for me. But now that it's here, yes, I absolutely want to deep dive in because I didn't appreciate that essentially Xcode is saying, I'm going to help you with this problem, right? And it
Yeah.
goes in line with, like you said, how Swift Assist and that is going to work out. But when they explained it today and they said, look, essentially it's going to check a compile time. And if it thinks there's going to be a problem, it's going to tell you. And at least based on the video that I watched, it's going to try and help me solve the problem. Then I was starting to get it. I'm like, okay, I'm understanding now. Now that it can tell me where I may potentially have a problem, instead of
Hmm.
assuming that I know I'm risking it, right?
Right.
That is something I can learn from and adapt to, and that also suggests eventually I'll just be doing this without even thinking about it because I'll have had the problem enough times.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see where this goes, especially the way they're doing this. And I don't want to jump ahead here, but the way that they're enabling Swift 6 in Xcode and how you're
16.
under control. Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry, yes, 16 with Swift 6. Um, that I feel more comfortable with. It's like, okay, I can choose to have this problem and learn from it,
Right.
as opposed
Right.
to I've got to understand this before I can ship the next version. What about
Right.
you? That's kind of where I'm at with it.
So I've been deep diving into it for
Okay.
probably like this year. Like I've
Okay. So,
enabled all of the experimental features. I wrote a whole blog post about it recently, just kind
okay.
of giving a rough sketch of what to do. And yeah, I mean, I'm happy to have more safety in my code. So,
Yes. Oh,
and
absolutely. Yeah.
they very much. I watched the video today, and it's very much like, look, this is not going to be easy. We're not pretending like it's going to be easy. Take it step by step. It's like migrating your code from Objective C to Swift or Swift to Swift 5
Yes.
or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
just take your time with it. There's a lot of easy ways to do exceptions and stuff. And yeah, I mean, I'm I'm happy that it's here, and yeah, it's going to be a challenge, but I think it's gonna fix a lot of issues
Yes.
coming down the line,
Yeah.
and that I'm
And it's
happy about.
interesting because I think it was this video that I was watching where they directly referenced the engineer said, hey, do you remember the Swift 2 to 3 years? and I was
Yeah,
like, hey, you put it in that context,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Um,
All right, cool.
so a couple of things. So I've opened Bushel in Xcode 16, and the one issue that I ran into a lot of was this access level modifiers on import declarations.
Mm,
The idea being like you have to, when you import a library, you have to say what, by default it will import it as internal, but if you want to make anything public from that library, you have to say public import. And so that was
interesting.
my big fix in Bushel with migrating to Xcode 16. So yeah, I did not expect that. I expected a lot of data race issues, but that wasn't the issue at all for me.
Cool. And that sounds
Um,
like a good thing, by the way, right? I
I
mean,
do.
you
Well,
know,
so there's this, what was it, explicitly built module thing. So I wonder if it's
yes.
related to
Yeah.
that, and if that will
Yeah.
help with build speeds, because I could use help with that
Should
with
do.
my
According to
apps.
my notes, that is exactly one of the
Yeah.
things that's going to make build speeds, because I think we
Mm.
were saying before about why do I have to build a preview and then build it again? And
Right.
that is
Right.
exactly what this is supposed to address.
Yeah. There's some interesting stuff about mutixes, which I have been looking for something like that. So I'm glad to see that we're moving away from GCD. So we're getting into a more Swifty, because there's some stuff like semaphores that have been missing. So it's good to see that.
Yeah, it feels like
Um,
we're moving away from, I'll frame it in kind of the hacky thing, but it
mhm.
feels like we're moving away from some of those transitional
Yes.
items, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I want to mention Swift Test. I've not gotten into
Mm-hmm.
that. I know that's been coming, so I'm happy to see that.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how that works with UI tests too. So
Yes.
I haven't done that. And then what else was I going to say? SwiftUI. I'm glad we're seeing that they're using that more internally. So
Yeah.
I think that's going to help a lot.
I feel like they had to say that, right?
Mhm.
As weird as that may
Right.
sound,
Right.
because there's always been this thing of like, how much is Apple actually using this? And
But I think
every
like
year,
I think this is
it
the
would,
year they're I don't think they do a lot of AppKit and UIKit anymore, honestly,
yes,
at this point.
and that's
I'll
good.
be curious to see, like, somebody does like a percentage thing and says how
Yes,
much is Swift UI,
yeah,
how much is Objective C, how much is Swift. And I bet
because
that's gonna increase a lot this year.
yeah, because up till now, it's always been, it's kind of been a bit of the meme joke of, yeah, you've converted these small apps, not to
Mhm.
imply that they're small as in a 5 minute thing, but they're the easier apps, right?
Yeah.
Like someone in my Discord today said, yeah, prove to me that you've converted Xcode over to SwiftUI. Good luck with that,
Yeah.
um, something along those lines. So I've always said, and I'm sure I probably say this every year, if Apple wants us to really, truly adopt something, they've got to prove it by doing it and dog fooding it themselves,
Right.
right? And
Exactly.
so I say well done for standing up this year and saying, look, we are doing this, and here's where we're
Right.
doing it. It's
Yep.
not just the Notes app,
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to mention?
No, I think the one thing I did want to say about the Swift testing, I'm going to be very interested to play with this
Okay.
because I think, at least from what I watched in one of the videos earlier, it's a darn sight easier to use that and get along with than it is compared to, using the pre-existing systems.
Yeah.
And of course, now I understand as well why there was this push to Swift macros because they're on everything, right?
Yeah. Right.
You know,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of cool stuff in the keynote that I can maybe mention. You probably already mentioned, but I don't know. Apple TV Insights, customizing Control Center and having an API available to us for that.
That's a big
Um,
one. I've seen a lot of folks today very super excited about that.
yeah,
Um, and I had to think about it a little bit before I fully appreciated why everyone was getting so excited. And then when I think about how often I use the control panel, it was like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
macOS gets iPhone mirroring,
That's a
passwords
big
out.
deal for me. That's a big deal for me. I will
Oh,
say
that's gonna be
that.
nice. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
We have the Apple Pencil plus calculator equals math notes, which is awesome.
Wasn't that a great demo though? I mean, that is something that makes for a great demo.
I'm excited about that.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we got it all. I think we did it all. Any last
Thing.
thoughts, Peter, before we sign off?
Yeah, I do want to say, I've on previous years, I've always felt that I get a little, but I'm left asking a lot. And I
Hmm.
think for me, this is a pivotal year that I got way more than I thought I was going to get in
Hmm.
key areas. And the ones that, like we said, Revision OS, the things that I thought Apple would just, Apple sales and marketing would want us to be raving about.
Right.
I feel like maybe they learned the lesson a little bit and they're like, you know what? We should make it about the developers, because in a couple of videos I've watched, they very specifically point out and say it's the developers that make it. And I feel like it's been a little while since Apple have said that. And I feel like what we got this year, yes, of course, massive improvements for the user once this AI stuff
Yeah.
hopefully works. But I do feel like developers got a lot of love this year. And I feel like it is one of those, we're going to try and fix a lot of things,
Hmm.
you know.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that would be sort of my takeaway, which is, wow, I think I actually got what I asked for, and I'm surprised.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Well put. Well put. Well,
Yeah,
stay tuned. We'll be talking more on this show. I'm gonna see who I can get to talk about Genmojis. We'll have a whole episode dedicated to
there you go.
Genmojis,
Yeah.
Pickle Eyes, and what was the thing you said? Cat riding a motorcycle. And
No, it was the turtle with a cupcake on their head riding a skateboard, I think it was.
yeah, yeah,
Someone explain this to me. What?
yeah,
I'm going to make
exactly.
one now, right?
Yeah,
I need this to be my new avatar because I don't know what it's going to mean, but,
right, right.
you'll remember it.
Yeah. Well,
You're
Peter,
that
it's good
turtle
talk.
cupcake guy. Yeah.
It'll be It'll be like the album art for that episode. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Peter, where can people find you online?
Yeah. So you can find me, compileswift.com, compileswift on all the networks. On Twitch, I am compiled dev. I changed it to open it up a little more, but compileswift for everything else. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Peter, for joining me at this late hour.
You're welcome. Yeah.
People can
I'm
find
still going. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, for you, this is normal.
Yeah.
People can find me on Twitter or X or whatever at LeoGDion. On Mastodon at leogdion.c.im. You can find me on YouTube at Bright Digit. If you're watching this video, like and subscribe. If you're listening to it on a podcast player, please give me a review. I'll be uploading pretty frequently new episodes. We'll see if I can get somebody to come on at the end of this week when I get back home. And there's a lot to talk about, so look forward to that. I'll be streaming Tuesdays again. We'll see what I have some ideas about when I want to stream next Tuesday. I have some app ideas post dub, so we'll see what I get to. But look out for that. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me. Enjoy DC week, and I will talk to you again. Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.